Welcome to the Fabric Spotlight, a series of talks on everything cloud, infrastructure, enterprise, all those things. Today, it's my pleasure to get perspective on those topics from Girish Juneja, Chief Digital Officer at Dover Corporation, who's joining us from East Coast of America. Welcome, Girish.
Thank you. Thank you for hosting me.
So we have known you for a while. You're on our Thought Leadership Council. Thank you very much for the participation. We know you as the Dover executive, and we have known you from before as well. Before we talk about the current role at Dover and current initiatives, could you share a bit about how we got here, the experiences that shaped your career?
I have had this always an interest in learning some new skills. And frankly, after a while, when I stop learning, I tend to kind of look for something else. So long ago, this is maybe I'll date myself. One of my earliest jobs was working X25 pad interface. This is pre-OSI stack.
Yeah, I remember those days.
Yep. So, those early days were more around learning technical skills. So OSI stack came about, HTTP, SSL, browsers, the big first boom of technology that I experienced personally. And I was very hands-on, very much into building technology. With that phase of learning, I moved into trying to build businesses. And found very quickly I needed more skill set. Went to business school, and then along the way started Cervega, which was an XML appliance company at that time. Right. And as we build that business, then the next set of learning skills was more around how to build software businesses in larger companies. That's kind of how Intel acquisition helped me grow in that area, because Intel had a fledgling software business that by the time I exited over 10 years later, the Intel software business was fairly large at that time. This is 2013 I'm talking about.
Yeah.
And through a couple of other changes, I arrived at Dover. But the interesting bit of learning here is how to take a traditional non-technology company and build that industrial digital muscle. So it has not just the technology for use inside. By technology, I mean software and electronics technology, but also offered as services to its customers.
More real.
So making both the products that the customer buy that are digital in nature, but connected to physical equipment, as well as transforming technology for use inside the business.
Right. Right. So, thanks for sharing all of that. Especially, you have these varied experiences and walking through this interesting kind of like a technology, then a vendor business executive, then a large company at Intel, and then now at an enterprise on the other side, if you will.
Consumption side. But we also see the funny part now, Prabakar, is Andreessen said it, or I don't know who's, Microsoft CEO said it, that every business is a software business. So we sell software capabilities around our physical equipment in retail fueling, in our trucks businesses. So we are both the consumer of software and electronics technologies, but also a producer of some of them.
Right. So you are still on both sides now.
No, I always like the mix of business and technology.
Okay, good. So let's kind of talk about, maybe we can talk about that, right? Like your role in Dover, this dual role. It must be exciting to kind of take this company, digitalization, advancing the enterprise business agenda. What are the key initiatives and innovations that you're focused on?
Yeah. So Dover is a well-renowned company, decades long in existence, has very strong brands it's a multi-industrial, so it has very strong brands in multiple different industrial segments. And those brands have been nurtured through excellence in manufacturing, excellence in operations, excellence in customer relationships. So where I came into it, it was about adding the excellence in digitization around it.
Mhm.
And as I explored our businesses, learned a lot. Frankly, learning these different vertical businesses was itself a very exciting journey.
Right.
As we did that, we stepped back and said, okay, what is the digitization journey of these businesses? And we broke it down into 4 pillars. So the first pillar was what we call digitization of customer experience.
Okay.
So in these physical products that are often sold through channels, all the customer touch points were still analog. A lot of person-to-person interactions, a lot of relationships, which are very important, but they could be enhanced significantly through digitization and data that is generated through those digitization of those touch points. So one element was digitization of customer experience, all the way from prospect to lead to opportunity to close, to use of the physical product, to service of the physical product, to warranty, repair, and then eventual disposition. The second was we framed it as connected product strategy. This is many of our physical products are in close proximity to an environment where there is a reason to learn in real time what's happening with that equipment. It could be because the equipment itself is consumer facing, like you and me, for example, go at retail gas station and we interact with the dispenser.
Yeah.
So what element of that interaction are digitizable, right? And in some other cases, we have a business where the equipment, we call it palletizer, goes inside a large polymer processing plant. And in that case, the central operations of that environment requires data from the palletizer. So how do you make that palletizer connectable so the central operations get the information about palletization quality, color, whether the blade that is cutting the pellets is going blunt or not. So all of that comes through combination of connected equipment and learning algorithms that we deploy on top of the data that we are collecting. The third element of our digitization strategy was digitizing really our internal employee touch points. And this involved rethinking of IT. IT in multi-industrials has typically been very fragmented. Individual brand businesses had their own approaches to information technology. And over time, while initially it works really well, over time, what it leads to is too many vendors, too many different fragmented capabilities, some security challenges, some cost challenges. So this opportunity was about rationalizing a lot of that fragmented IT into some common core capabilities or services, if you were to call it, in today's day and age, that can be used across our multi-industrial brands. And then finally is digitization of the back office. This is about supply chain. This is about order processing. This is about what is today's parlance would be called as robotics automation. This would be digitization of the factory where we build our plants, build our equipment itself, digitization of that in order to know machine uptime and so on. So this back office digitization is our fourth pillar. So we are transforming on these 4 threads over the last couple of years and continue to do so.
Yeah, so it's very interesting. The 4 pillars, kind of like the back office, the intranet, and then the extranet with the customers, and then the now
products
the
themselves.
bold new front is connecting all the products and being maybe going towards automation as well.
Yeah.
So that is a very, very succinct summary. So thank you very much for that. That was good to hear. So we at the Fabric are focusing on the infrastructure elements, the cloud and IoT infrastructure. So let's kind of like take the cloud part of it first. In this digitization pillars that you talked about, what aspects are kind of driving the enterprise cloud adoption at Dover?
If you don't mind, I'll present it in 2 ways: the ways we are adopting it internally and the ways we are actually helping our customer adopt it as well, right? So intranet and extranet, maybe those are 2 perspectives. So on the intranet side, on cloud adoption, we have a significant legacy of applications, as you can imagine. Company that has been around, some of our brands have been around 100 years. And that means you can't just throw a lot of what is there out of the window and start afresh. There's way too much capabilities that are embedded in existing systems that are needed. So our approach is multifold. We look at where appropriate to go cloud native, build applications where the build is possible. There we try and go cloud native. In some different situations, complete build is not viable. There we go to data center consolidation and go through managed services. And then third is there are new workloads that basically are better served by certain capabilities offered by SaaS vendors. And there we move over to SaaS applications. So this is on the intranet side, right? SaaS, if you don't have to build it and it's a functionality that's available now as a SaaS service and well established. Native cloud, where we have to build the application or assemble the applications, and we have the opportunity to create new value by assembling it in a new way. You can go cloud native. And data center consolidation, where neither of those two are a viable approach. Okay. So that's on the intranet side. Right. On the extranet side, with our customers, we are focusing a lot on providing operational security and compliance capability to the customers that operate our equipment through cloud-based services. These are cloud-native application built specifically in the last 3 years plus, designed for our customers. For example, in the waste hauling space, we have an application called Connected Collections, which provide efficiency to our waste hauling customers. It takes information coming out of our trucks, but it also combines that information with some of the back office applications customer may have, and it also combines with some third-party services that we bring together. Okay. Similarly, in retail fueling space, we have a connected fuel station service available for our customers, completely cloud native. Microsoft is a partner in that journey, and build with strong collaboration with Azure. And this capability allows retail fuel station to optimize their operations, both above ground and underground, and to achieve compliance while improving their customer experience at the dispenser through a set of microservices that are exposed using a cloud application that can be consumed in individual modules or completely as one system.
You mentioned a couple of things that are kind of dear to our heart, cloud native and microservices. So I would like to kind of double click on a couple of the things that you said. One is when you deploy this cloud native applications, and I presume you use like Kubernetes and those kinds of things. What's your perspective on the managing that deployment, making sure that it is delivering the right kind of responsiveness to the end users? What are your thoughts on what kind of a wish list that you have that if you had, it would work well for you?
Yeah, it's a really good question, actually. So, as is typical, the development community usually runs much faster than the operational capability around those new tools and capabilities, right? So to give you an example, microservices are a well-established design pattern, but if you go too literal on it, you might have an unmanageable set of microservices that you cannot operationally assemble easily. So that's kind of where Docker and Kubernetes come in to help you. But then as an enterprise, you run into some of the security and non-operational feature set that you need, non-functional feature set that you need that is not available today in the market around those kind of deployment models. So, from a pure development ease, portability ease, auto scaling ease, these new frameworks especially around Kubernetes and Docker, are excellent. And we use them very selectively because the places where they're weak at is security, controls, compliance, some of the dimensions that kind of limit enterprise deployments of these kind of cloud native applications. So our path is gradual and deliberate. So we started with microservices based on direct EC2 or Azure containers. And then we started to move on to Docker containers, and now we are beginning to look at Kubernetes, but we still are addressing, like you said, from a wishlist standpoint, security, compliance, those kind of issues are still gap areas.
Right. So yeah, we talked about kind of like the bridging between these environments and the application management, performance, and those kinds of things. But you did emphasize security and compliance a couple of times. So can you kind of elaborate upon the challenges that you face around it and what you wish you had? Like, is there kind of like a perimeter security, or do you need some kind of a distributed mesh kind of security? What's your thoughts on that?
It's an and, not an or, right? So we have, when you look at security for a public enterprise, you're looking at data and information, the persistence layer security. You're looking at the perimeter security, and you're looking at access and authorization framework, not just to enforce it, but also to know who could have access what when, right?
Yeah.
So it's an and of all of them. So we're looking for, we want to deploy capabilities that allow us to put these kind of controls easily and without requiring a lot of overhead from our developers to have to learn all the nuances of how to do so, because it consumes much more resources in these non-functional areas than frankly we have to offer. So we'll look at partners and solution providers that can address those gaps.
So I heard you talk about your customers and some of the things that they have at their locations. So that sounds like edge. So are you looking at also thinking about just the centralized data centers and clouds, or are you thinking about, oh, it would be nice if I have something that's closer to the customer at the edge? What's your thought process on that?
Yeah, no, so it's, in industrial environment, there are many situations, especially in the extranet side, where the execution, not just the data observation, but also execution of reaction to that data observation needs to happen locally. It may be for security reason, it may be for response time reasons. So we are definitely very focused on the edge. Many of our, I gave an example of our waste hauling truck monitoring gateway. The gateway that gets deployed in that truck is a very capable gateway with the NVIDIA processors and so on. So we run machine learning algorithms right on that vehicle so that we can react on the images we are collecting around the cameras in that environment. Similarly, there are a couple other examples where the edge has to be self-sufficient, not just to pick data, but also to act upon that data. Now, acting upon may involve running an algorithm. It may involve putting an alert on a human-machine interface.
Right.
Or it may involve some simple closed-loop systems that turns off an actuator. So the edge is critical for service delivery in our industrial IoT space. Right.
So IoT, that's kind of like a good segue to, are there like a specific requirements that you have in there in terms of edge compute? You mentioned security issues that may be kind of like you're connecting previously unconnected, and at the gateway there, security issues there, or secure remote operations, access to equipment from your location into the customer location and things like that, especially with this shelter in place and isolation kind of scenarios. What are you encountering there?
Well, look, cybersecurity has always been a top concern of ours in our digitization journey, and frankly, this events of last few months have only enhanced that alertness to cybersecurity issues. We don't publicly disclose a lot of what we are trying to do in that space, but suffices to say, our primary objective is to protect ours and our customers' critical data and critical operations. And we oftentimes, err on the side of overcaution in those areas to ensure that we can provide the level of, security needed for our customers.
Okay.
Now, what we have seen is because of employees staying home, we have, for example, mandated VPN usage across the board with multi-factor authentication. We have added a couple of other security checkpoints with tools to validate whether we have the right kind of users in our network, and to detect if there are any behavioral or other anomalies in our environment. This continues to be, like I said, an area of hypervigilance for us.
Right. Thank you for that. So you kind of like mentioned one more thing that I was going to bring up, and that's a great segue as well. You talked about employees working from home or some other distributed workforce, from the trucks, etc. So the transition from branches to these more mobile distributed type of work environment, are there kind of like concerns or quality of experience for the applications that they are using, whether it's conferencing or whether it's desktops or whether it's some other type of collaboration? How are you dealing with that type of issues?
That's a good question. I think we are all observing innovation in real time in all these spaces. Week by week, we see some of the collaboration software companies add features.
No.
So you're right. I mean, the world wasn't designed, technology wasn't designed for everybody to be working from home.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of catch up in technology to be done there. Quality of service in video conferencing is a constant nag in organizations today. Even simple things like for what kind of applications you VPN in and for what kind of applications you don't is a question that is debated hotly.
Also, the path that you take, whether you have to go to the data center all the time or whether you can go directly.
Yeah, whether you serve straight from, you do a bypass at the edge or you come to the data center to be securely routed is also application by application, something that gets discussed pretty intensely. So you're right, all of these are new issues that were important, but they were important as edge cases, and they've suddenly become the core cases, not to overuse the term edge.
You put your finger on it. That is the switch that has taken place.
Yeah.
So we have talked about a bunch of different infrastructure areas. Let's kind of like take a slight change from that and kind of focus on you. So again, we started with you, coming back full circle to you. You have had this interesting journey, right? You talked about the technology, the business, and you have spanned both vendor and IT executive roles. So when you talk about companies that have to come and say, hey, look at this great things that we have, it's really is going to change the world. What kind of insights can you share about what works or what just your eyes glaze over?
Well, the best advice is something you can't really execute, which is being lucky is better than being right.
Not to be in the right place to get lucky. Also.
Exactly, but I think what I would say is, look, oftentimes technology companies, because I've been on the vendor side, I can say that with some level of first-hand knowledge, tends to get enamored by the technology itself. And organizations are dealing with complex challenges, not least of which is change management and deploying new capabilities. So vendors often do not spend enough time understanding the value creation they can provide. And in order to realize that value, what enterprise change management has to get executed.
Okay.
Those are the two things I think technology vendors underestimate or don't spend enough time understanding. If it's a nail and you got a hammer and it's a perfect hammer for the perfect nail, it's easy, right? But oftentimes technologies, new technology especially, is a little fuzzier than that. It's trying to find that exact nail. So you have to spend enough time to understand organization by organization what value you can create, and then help them not just see the value of the technology, but also how the rollout, how the change management around that rollout can be done in a way that the value is not lost just in that process. So being on the both side of the camp, I think that's the best advice I can give, and I think it's the least understood part on the vendor side.
Interesting, yeah. Kind of put yourself in the IT executive shoes and see how it is going to work for them.
Yes, so organizational stakeholder set is large. Even when technology has been talked to with a digital or a IT person. So understanding that stakeholder landscape, understanding that company's business and value creation possibilities, and then connecting what you're going to discuss and how you're going to, kind of help the company with that context is, I think, paramount. So, other than that, obviously, this tech innovation is intense, and you come across fascinating technology every day. Just understand that companies can't deal with new technology every day. There is way too much change management involved to deploy a new technology anywhere. So you have typically 2 or 3 major technology deployments, maybe 5 if you're bigger. You're going to do at scale outside of POCs. I'm talking about POCs and pilots. The question is, for you to make it into that 3 or 5 list, you have to A, be a significant value creator, and B, be able to communicate how that value is not going to be lost in the change management involved to deploy that capability.
And also to make it easier to integrate and deploy.
Yeah.
Okay. So other side of things is that you have been an entrepreneur and successful, exited to Intel and all of those. Are there any kind of like entrepreneurial guidance, advice that you would like to give? A lot of the audience are entrepreneurs. What's your thought on just that life, that journey? And you already talked about working with enterprises and big companies, but working with some of the strategics, as you did with Intel. So any advice on that?
You mean from the other side, as an entrepreneur working with larger companies?
What can you communicate that they should keeping in mind?
Well, in addition to what I just said, what I would say is there are significant opportunities and more continue to emerge as technology evolves. So there is one thing I would say is great time to be an entrepreneur. The low market time is a perfect time to actually, try some things and come up with new solutions. So I'm always an encourager of entrepreneurs anywhere. So please go ahead and strive what you must. What I would say is keep an eye on the ball in terms of understanding the problem statement clearly. When you're trying to work with companies like us, oftentimes you're trying to sometimes just try to get feedback. Sometimes you're trying to sell. Sometimes you're trying to kind of lay the groundworks for fundraising by having enough of a dialogue with various companies that convey that the idea that you have has some strength. So my suggestion would be, again, segment the customer set you want to go after. Not every customer is alike, and not every customer is fit for whatever tool you are going to talk about. Identify the leading edge of that spear, get the leading technology executives in that company, listen to you, to give you feedback, to be kind of a willing encouragers. You can always find a few people like me in various companies who would be. And then fine tune your value proposition, your product market fit there before you try and expand and take it to a broader audience. This will help reduce your time to market, it'll reduce your time to money in terms of fundraising, and it'll also get you the kind of input you need to get the rest of the team rallied around the solution that you're envisioning. So those maybe are the only other things I can add.
Great. Yeah, I mean, we have had this all these great interactions with you, and you've always been willing to listen and give feedback and guidance. So thank you very much for that. That's been fantastic. And thanks, Girish, for joining us. And I think that brings us to a close for this conversation. And thank you all for watching. We'll be back soon with another Spotlight episode. Stay tuned.
Thanks, Prabakar. Thanks for hosting me. Bye now.